It's just numbers. There is no magic. Because I'd been like following all these people, these marketing gurus and these martial arts industry consultants, and I was like, I have to follow the magic, the secret formula. The secret formula is numbers. It's just math. It's just that. So I want you to start looking at marketing differently than how you currently are. So when you realize it's just a numbers game, everything changes. I remember the specific moment, and nobody, I'm sure they kind of thought I was just babbling and they didn't understand it, but I remember the specific moment. I had this little office, it was like a little closet, and I was in there and I was just typing away, and all of a sudden I stared at my screen and I went, it's just numbers. There is no magic. Because I'd been like following all these people, these marketing gurus and these martial arts industry consultants, and I was like, I have to follow the magic, the secret formula. The secret formula is numbers. It's just math. It's just that. And once you crack that code, you can literally buy as many students as you want. And you can fill your school up with as many students as you want. Now, the back end, the retention, is what we'll talk about in just a moment, but we're not talking about that yet. We're talking about the front end, which is just buying the students that you need, okay? So once you have acquired customers, the next key is to lower your acquisition costs even more or extend the lifetime value of the customer. So you've either got to get the cost of $225 down to $200 to $175 to whatever it is. You got to keep driving it lower, or you got to extend the lifetime value of the customer so they stick with you for longer than 18 months so you make more money. Thumbs up if that's making sense. This is how you're going to become even more profitable. Okay, so that was key number 1. So if you didn't get anything out of that, you need to go figure out how much it costs you to acquire a student. Your number 1 goal is to sell at a 40 to 60% close rate. We did talk about that earlier. You guys were asking me that. So if you're closing at a higher rate than that, first thing I would do before changing your prices is I would change who's teaching the intro lesson and see if I could get them to close at the same rate. So you could be more leveraged, right? Because that means the sales process is really, really good. Can we go do something else? Or could you have multiple sales, like somebody else is doing a sale and you're doing a sale, and therefore you double your results? So let's do that. If we're still closing at 80%, even with another person who's brand new at sales, never sold before, then we need to look at raising our prices because the market is screaming at you. You're too freaking cheap. You need to raise your prices. You should be here, 40 to 60% close rate. You know, the interesting thing is once I got outside of the martial arts industry and I started talking to other businesses and I started opening additional businesses that we run and stuff like that, one of the things that happened was I started realizing that in the martial arts industry, for whatever reason, somebody a long time ago said, you have to be closing at 50% or you're horrible at sales. Has anybody heard that before? You at least need to be closing 50% or more? You guys heard that? No? Never? Or do you think that you should be closing at like 80% or 90%? Like that's what you should be doing? Do you know that no other industry closes at 80 to 90%? Do you know that the average industry closes at 15 to 25% of all leads? You get 100 leads in, you might get 1 or 2 closed. The martial arts industry, though, for whatever reason, we randomly came up with these numbers. No, we're talking about a lead, a name and a phone number. 60% of leads. So into a student, 40 to 60% of leads that have come in. Yes, if they're present, yes, they need to come in and be present. No, the lead conversion will be much lower. But I'm talking about on average in any other industry, if you have someone standing across from you, let's use the car industry as an example, someone sitting across from you, you only have probably about a 20 to 30% close rate. That's it. Let's talk about appliance sales. You go and you sell an appliance, 20 to 30% close rate. Let's talk HVAC. You're selling HVAC, 20 to 30% close rate. If you are an expert salesperson, you might push 35%. That's it. But for whatever reason, in the martial arts, we're like, we got to be closing at 80 or 90%. That's why for a lot of people, you charge so little because you think that you're supposed to be closing at 80 to 90% when you really should be closing closer to 40 to 60%. That's the market telling you you need to charge more. So if you're priced correctly, I'm going to show you how to price yourself correctly. Take your average household income in your area and you need to multiply it by 0.02 or 0.03 for a range. I've taught this in YouTube videos. I've taught this to my clients. This is the easiest way to figure out how much you should charge in your area. I'm going to show you the math really quick. So that's going to be the range of your yearly cost. So for example, I'll do the math on this next page. Let's say that you have an average household income of $75,000 per year in your area. You multiply that by 0.02, that means $1,500, and you divide that by 12, that's going to be about $125 per month. That's the average that you can charge. A little above average would be 0.03. And so that gives you a range. So I can charge anywhere from $125 to $187. how did I come up with 0.02 and 0.03? Statistically speaking, remember I said this earlier, leisure activities, it's usually about 10% of the average household income. It's pushed over to leisure activities, this, physical things like what we do, martial arts. But it's also martial arts and dance and gymnastics and piano and tennis and track and field and like all these other things. So the martial arts industry holds about 2 to 3% of that 10%. That's why we've got that number. Every time I've used this formula, this is the exact sweet spot. When people start getting outside of this number or under this number, that's when we see the up and down on how much they're charging, or on their clothes rather, based off of that. Here's another example. Let's say you live in an area with a little bit more cash in your area, $150,000 per year. That means you could be charging somewhere close to $250 all the way up to $375 per month on average. So you really need to look at that. If you're in the United States, you can go to a place called datausa.io and you can put in your city and you can look up what is the average household income in your city. I don't know what it might be for the UK, Mr. Ben. So, all right, thank you. When you find out, let me know. So, but here in the States, you can do that. I know in Canada, there's Data USA pulls from the US Census, and I know in Canada, they have an alternative website as well that also pulls from the Canadian Census. So take a look at that, see what your average household income is. So if you're closing at 90%, market's telling you that you're too cheap. We kind of talked about that. And if you're pricing correctly and you're closing at 20%, you need to improve at sales. That's far too low. Your conversion rate is far too low. Talk to you guys about. So for those that are clients, hang back. We're going to be going through how to add that 10K on in the next 30 days. So we'll kind of move into these tables up here. We'll get our live stream going on as well. But yeah, you guys have hopefully learned a lot. All right, you guys. Well, awesome. Give yourself some big round of applause, big energy.